And welcome back to 101 East. This week, asking whether Indonesia's security forces are sufficiently committed to United Nations standards on human rights. Now, the Jakarta government argues the state has made significant progress in this regard, but you don't have to go far to find examples of citizens in conflict with power and coming off worst. Chan Tao Cho visited a village in Bogor, south of Jakarta, where last year members of the Air Force clashed with civilians in a land dispute.
This paddy field sustains the livelihood of hundreds of families nearby. But in January last year, the Atang Sanjaya Air Base began to develop it as a training facility. Farmers say they gathered to protest against bulldozers on their land, only to be severely beaten by the very men under oath to protect their lives. Uchop doesn't remember much about the rest of that day after a rifle butt smashed his head.
I
was defending my land because they were going to dig on it. Suddenly there were shots. My friends ran, but I couldn't run, so they went for me.
He was not the only one injured.
I saw many people demonstrating, so I joined in. Then the Air Force soldiers ordered us to run. As I ran for my life, one of them opened fire. I was hit in the neck and fainted. I woke up in a Jakarta hospital.
This woman claims one officer ripped her gold chain from her neck when she tried to stop a bulldozer. Later, more officers raided homes in her village to hunt down the demonstrators.
They forced their way into my house. About 30 soldiers raided every room in their muddy boots. Then they went to my father's house, slapped my daughter, slapped my brother and dragged my father around.
Airbase commanders apologized to the villagers after the incident.
These instances, they are not a matter of policy, they are not systematic, they are not widespread. Every one of these soldiers, especially low-ranking soldiers, are low paid, and so they tend to be involved in some degree of extortion or corruption, even torture. But these are random acts, and we have acted on them.
Even so, the training facility appears to be taking shape on the disputed land.
Dengan uang kerohiman ini untuk daratan Rp5.000.
They offered to compensate us about 50 cents per square meter of land and $1 per square meter of paddy field. Most people here refused it, so we brought the matter to the parliament. It's far from the market value of this area. In March this year, the parliament issued an order. 1. There should be no more intimidation by any Air Force personnel. 2. No work is to be carried out on the disputed land while its ownership is being sorted out.
The intimidation has stopped, but land ownership is still uncertain as villagers scramble to prove the land they farmed on for decades belongs to them. In the meantime, the clock ticks as excavation works continue on the paddy fields.
Still with me from Jakarta, Teo Sambuaga, chairman of the Indonesian Parliament's Defence and Foreign Affairs Committee, and here in KL, Haris Azhar from the human rights group Kontras and Dr. Aris Mundayat from Indonesia's Gajah Mada University. Amnesty International says that there is still a prevalent culture of violence among police and military officials. Do they have a point?
Yes. This kind of culture actually coming from the negative valuation from the military or from the government, especially in the past, toward the poor people, toward the victims. So there is a kind of deotherization of the victims, and then in this case, so the victim becoming very, very weak. They are, there's no protection from the government to the poor, to the victims.
Teo Sambuaga, you said that there is a lot of progress being made in these areas, but the Jakarta Legal Aid Institute, for instance, did a study where they found over 80% of prisoners complained of torture or violent treatment.
Yes, it might happen, and then has to be treated by law, and that has to those who are committed wrongdoing has to be sent to trial.
Well, you say it may happen, but they say that it does happen.
That's why it should not be happening, of course. Then it may happen, and then if there is cases from that, has to be let's say sent by trial. And then in the case of the you mentioned just now land dispute. Yes, also cases come up to the parliament, and then we also see that, and then we ask the commander or ask the Minister of Defense to solve this problem by protecting the right of the people, right of their retirement of the military, who are always come up with their problem of land or housing with this. And sometimes we found out that the violence involved this by the soldiers, it is not systemic. I don't agree, but it's systemic.
But the problem is there is no strong correction to all that violence. That's why it still happens. The reputations always happen to the civilian.
When you say a strong reaction, what would you like to see?
There is no accountability. There is no adequate punishment. There is no justice for victim. There is no access from victim to go to the trial, to give the witnesses and so on.
Yeah, I just want to ask to Mr. Teo Sambuaga, so how independent the judicial system in Indonesia? So that's the problem that we face.
That the judiciary system, I think it's theoretically should be independent, and in practically, I think independence has been trying very much to be in place, work in place. But yes, I admit that we should work hard to have independence in place in the judiciary system.
It's not
but
only,
you are talking about the cases.
But we cannot only rely on the law and the institution. At the political area, like parliament, or maybe strong political will from the president, should be declared. This is very important. It's not only the terrorism, it's not only the drugs, it's not only the corruption. The human rights also important. That should be taken care of very well. That should be shown.
Sure, I agree with this.
You're agreeing wholeheartedly with all these ideas, and yet the question of why have these ideas not been fully implemented has yet to be answered. We have had very definitive comments from the United Nations, from Amnesty International, from many aid groups, which say that there are still insufficient provisions within the legal system and insufficient enforcement of the ideas that you say you agree with. So why is that the basic steps not yet being taken?
That is the implementation of the law, implementation of the independence of the judiciary system, and the control of the commander, if we are talking about military personnel, has to be in place. They have to work hard to make sure that all the rules, all the regulation be obeyed and in this regard. And
we're running out of time.
Whoever violate law, whoever violates law, has to be sent to trial.
Let me ask you this. We've had 10 years since Reformasi. Are you at least seeing a progression towards a better situation than we saw 10 years ago?
In the case of human rights, the progress is very slow. Mr. Teo Sambuaga is too normative for me, because what we have to see in this case is there is a kind of vested interest behind the the judicial system is not independent. So there is a kind of vested interest behind that.
Sure.
So we need to pinpoint that kind of.
But again, I mean, the state of the progress that we're seeing after so many years of an entrenched system, changing the culture within 10 years may be seen as a bit ambitious. Are we at least seeing progress?
There is a changes after 10 years, but there is no significant to respect the human rights. We amend the Constitution, and we put one chapter about human rights. We have a human rights law, but the victims getting poor and far away from the justice. So and the worst thing is the violence still happen up to now. So this reform is important, but this reform give us a face of ambiguity. So in one hand we have the laws, but the other hand, violence still happen, and the past victims came from the past, it's still far away to get justice.
And at that point, we're going to have to leave it. Gentlemen, thank you all very much indeed for talking to us today. That's all we have time for. My thanks to guests Teo Sambuaga in Jakarta. Haris Azhar and Dr. Aris Mundayat here in KL, and from all of us here at 101 East, until next time, it's goodbye.